Call this meeting to order of the Economic Improvement Corporation. It is Monday, August 21st, and it's just a little bit after 4 o'clock, and I'll ask Jim if he will do our invocation for us.
Bow as we pray, please. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the many blessings of this day, and Father, we thank you for each one of us that are conducting the city's business. May we do it to glorify your kingdom's work. Father, we ask you to bless the ongoing business that we have to go with the EIC, and we ask you, Lord, to bless those in our community that are involved in this, that they may also want to edify your kingdom and our growth of this city. And Father, we ask all of these things as we pursue your work in Christ's name and for his sake, always. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Well, there are the bells, so I guess that's more official than the clock on the wall, I suppose. Anyway, we'll move on to item number 1 on the agenda, which is our Visitors and Citizens Forum. Any citizen with business not scheduled on the agenda may speak to the Economic Improvement Corporation. No deliberation or action can be taken on these items because of the Open Meetings Act, requiring that an item be posted on the agenda 72 hours before the meeting. Visitors are asked to limit their presentation to 3 minutes. Do we have any visitors that would like to speak? All right, I don't see any, so we'll move on to item number 2, which is approval of the minutes. And the minutes are part of the package that you have in front of you. I think each of you got a copy of that as well. So do we have any, well, let me give you a minute to review those minutes in case you didn't have time to read them before. All right, anyone have any issues with the minutes? We'll talk about that in a second. A motion to approve the minutes as written?
I so move that we approve them as read.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion of the minutes? Any changes? All those in favor signal by raising your right hand. Any opposed, same sign. And that carries, and the minutes are approved. All right, item number 3 are the monthly reports of the July 2017 reports. Welcome.
Good afternoon. For your operating account, the beginning balance was $2,464,033. You had income in the month of July of $284,934. You had expenses of $101,211. Leaving you an ending cash balance of $2,647,756. On the following page in your packet is the detail that shows your budget, the current period expense, your year-to-date and remaining budgets, which ties to your operating fund. On the following page is your sales tax revenue analysis, and you'll see that in the month of July, our sales tax was rather large. We did have some audits that the state had done to brought in some taxes. This next month you'll see that it's back more in line, but it's still up for the year. The following page is your capital projects fund. There was no activity in the month, so your cash balance remains at $1,869,155. The following page shows the detail that's in that fund, and this is where we move the money from your operating fund to that fund until it goes into an active project. So those funds are still sitting there. I created a new page behind that, and that shows y'all's participation in some projects that are ongoing that y'all have funded part of it, or in some cases the majority of it. So it shows what the approved budget for the project is, y'all's portion, and other contributing sources, and the remaining balance of those particular projects that are ongoing. Just gives you a little more information to see how the progress is. And on the last page is your cash and investments. Shows your placement between your operating and your capital fund, the money that you have in your cash, which is in your Wells Fargo of $10,000, and the other is invested, so you're getting a better return of interest.
Okay, I have a question on
Sure.
your new report on page 15.
Okay.
So, just give me an example. Let's take the River Trail. Approved budget of $6,525,000 and EIC's funding of $6 million. If we go all the way to the right, the projected or the project balance $791,909. Tell me what that is.
That's the cash left, and it'll be going to the west side when they complete that.
Okay, and then if you go to the reuse system, the $14 million that's left over in that right column.
At this time, that's what's there.
Where is that money at this time?
It's in our capital projects, the city's capital projects
Okay.
fund, yes.
So none of these
That's
will
for
tie
utility.
back?
No. Now, if there is money left over, it will go back to y'all's.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions?
Thanks for the new report, I like it.
Sure, thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Sandra.
Sandra.
Oh, one question.
Well, this is just an ignorant question, obviously. Okay, how much is free, is 14.4 million is free in that account in the water that hasn't been spent?
What do you mean free?
Has not been spent,
That is the cash balance as of July 31st.
okay.
Or that's the balance of the project. The cash, there's still gonna be a transfer over from y'all's fund in the next year's budget of 1.5. This is just the budget balance.
Okay,
That's what's left of the project.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the cash, because you're earning interest and stuff along also as that goes.
Okay.
So just, and this isn't an ignorant question, it just means I don't know the answer. On the reuse system, the $3 million from the EIC, is that gonna be like the first part spent, or what, if there was,
It's whenever they get to the distribution lines,
okay, so that will all be spent, right? There, I mean, if there's.
to the best of my
okay,
knowledge, according to the project.
Okay,
$1.5 million has been transferred for this year, and then in the next year's budget, the other will,
okay,
as needed. Yes.
All right. Any other questions?
thank you. I
Thank
like
Thanks,
it.
Sandra.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thanks, Sandra.
All right, item 3B next is the projects update. EA, I suppose that's you?
Yes, sir. Thank
All
you very
right.
much. We've got 4 projects to update you on. Kerrville Sports Complex is nearing substantial completion for the overall field and infrastructure that is at that, still working hard on the DBAT facility and have moved to punch list items predominantly for the majority of the rest of the fields. Really trying to get grass to even up. They are doing some punch lists and leveling some fields. We are mid-season with soccer, so I believe soccer is going to end up starting out there in the spring rather than the fall for this year. But we're getting that facility up to pristine before we let everybody out loose on it. Reuse distribution mains. Yes, sir.
Just because I play softball,
Yes, sir.
so how many senior softball fields are we gonna have, and how many like baseball fields are there gonna be for senior baseball?
Well, they are flexible, and we're actually, I think, meeting with the adult senior softball league this week, so we're going to be having some discussion with them. But a lot of those fields are flexible, so they can accommodate larger groups and different flexibility with groups.
Cool.
So
Will we have any planned tournaments for next year yet, potentially for 2018?
I think DBAT is working on that. There's not a confirmed schedule yet, but they are working through those.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Reuse distribution mains, that work continues to progress. You may have seen probably the most visible one. If you cross over the Guadalupe River at 534, they're doing the work right there, trying to get across the river. So that's continuing to progress in a timely fashion. We got most of the work done, I think, around the school areas, which is what we were really charging hard to get past, so we can open up schools and not impact that school traffic too bad.
do we know when I guess it's Legion Drive running towards Shriner, where I assume that was the reuse line that got dug up. Do we know how long it's gonna stay? It's not good to drive on right now.
I don't know right offhand what the
Okay.
schedule for that is, but
Okay.
I can look into that for you.
All right.
River Trail West, we are currently in the engineering contract. They're getting close on that. We're hoping to have that in our staff hands for review here over this next month. Once we can get back with them and a little bit of back and forth, I'm sure, on the engineering work. But we're hoping to bring that out to bid here at the late summer, early fall time frame. And then tennis center improvements, happy to tell you we do have tomorrow on the council agenda a contract that we have negotiated with Strickle Rollins and Associates. That came in right at $166,000, I believe, with contingency. So right in line with where we thought it would come in at in that 150, 160,000 range. So we're excited to have that on the agenda. Hopefully that'll get approved and we can move that project forward and get the stakeholders involved this fall and really get the engineering work moving along, design engineering work.
Good.
Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Thanks,
EA.
Thank you, EA.
All right, on to item number 4, which is actually 4A, which is conduct the annual review and consideration of Kerrville Economic Development Corporation's fulfillment of its obligations pursuant to the Economic Development Grant Agreement between EIC and KEDC, and the appropriation of a funding amount of up to $180,000 for the fiscal year 2018. Brian O'Connor is here from KEDC, and glad
Good
to have
afternoon.
you.
Thanks for having me back. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge I have KDC board member Mike Whitler with us today, and also staff, Teresa Metcalf. I will be asking Teresa to join me at the podium. Teresa keeps our books on a daily basis, and as we get into the weeds on these type of things, I'm going to ask her to join me at the podium. What you have before you is a statement of cash flows and budget request. I want to start out by thanking the EIC board. When we last came before you on July 17th, there were some questions that we were ill-prepared to answer at the time. We went back and actually met with our board and so forth, and we started to really sharpen our pencil, and we have revised our budget request accordingly. We have had a history of asking for, at least the last 2 fiscal years, $180,000 from the EIC to cover operations. We have since adjusted that downward to $140,000 to be able to cover operations. We feel that that is adequate moving forward, and hope for your support in terms of this this initiative. I think the EIC is gaining a lot of traction, and we got some. It's been pretty much a rebuilding year, so to speak. Getting projects within the pipeline really takes some time, but I really like the direction that we're going and the aggressiveness that the organization, with the support of the board, is showing at this point in time.
All right. Anyone have any questions with regard to the budgets on page 20 of your package?
Well, I guess I would like to know why that it was reduced.
Why it was reduced? Actually, we had adequate contingency funds. You'll see that we will operationally end up generating, we'll go into the negative $40,000, but because we have been fiscally prudent with the use of the funds that we've been given by all the stakeholders, we're able to tap in those contingencies to cover operations.
Does this mean that you're going to have a loss at the end of the year?
We could conceivably, but as I said, once again, because we have the contingency, it won't actually come across as a loss.
How much is the contingency?
The contingency at this point in time, as of the end of next fiscal year, is projected, this current fiscal year is 107. It's listed for projected year-end 16-17. And if we go into that $40,000, we'll have a net contingency of about $67,000.
Does that mean that you won't be able to do the things that you would like to do or that we should do?
No, not at all. I think the budget is ample so that we can be aggressive. We had talked about some of the initiatives that KDC would like to start up over the next year. I can't, because they're new initiatives, I really can't anticipate maybe what some of those costs are, but I can tell you with the contingency that we've amassed, I think it should be adequate to be able to cover those expenses.
Well, historically, they've always asked for 180, and I guess I'd like to know what's changed.
Well, I think honestly we've been a lot more frugal. You have somebody who's been doing this work for 25 years. I typically don't attend the trainings and conferences and so forth that some of my predecessors had. We had pointed this out when we had come before EIC last time. Administratively, we've had staff was on a full-time basis. Now we have staff that's on a part-time basis. There was also a wage discrepancy also between the previous staff and current staff. So I think that we've been able to manage to kind of trim some of our expenses. Plus, we had also had 3 consecutive pay periods in which we didn't have an executive director, and that helped us create some additional savings as well.
I guess my thought about this is that if we've got work to do, I'm not quite sure that I would want to reduce the budget with the importance of what you guys are doing.
And sir, I do appreciate that. I would like to leave it at least open the option that we return to the EIC. And should we need those additional funds, come and really speak to you about it and tell you why it is we need those funds and what we plan on using those for.
Well, isn't it clearer to say that you're actually not requesting spending differently? You're just requesting less from EIC because you're dipping into the reserve, correct? So to answer his question, we're not actually talking about spending less on the task. We're spending the same amount on the task. We're just getting the funding from somewhere else.
But the way I
Right.
heard it was, I hear that, but what I heard Brian say was that there is an additional fund there because of you've reduced some spending. Right?
Correct.
So it's maybe a little bit of both.
Well, actually, it was reduced temporarily. So
Plus some of the stuff
the
that he did.
request is made based on your budget and at the beginning of the year for the future year. And what's happened is that that budget has not been expensed. And
Yeah.
so it remained there. And so they don't have a use for it. And it's going to leave them with an ending cash balance of
60 something.
more than that. If you funded it all,
Yeah.
it's going to be
If you fund it fully,
107 again.
yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that. I just think of the thing about having to come back to the EIC for additional money down the road. And if you think that that's fine, then that's your budget. I'm not going to question.
Yeah, I think
agree
it's-
with Ken that we've got, it looks like you're flush, but we've seen that before when we had to come back at the end of the year and ask for additional funds. My thought is give it to you now if you think you need it. If you don't, fine.
We could do that, and then if we don't need those funds, we could actually return those to the EIC, if that's the will of the board.
You'd still have 107,450.79 basically if we gave you the extra 40. It would carry out,
That-
it would be the same balance.
That's
for
correct,
next year.
yeah.
So in effect, you're giving the money back now, as opposed to giving it to you now and at the end of the year, then give it back and that sort of stuff. And you still got 67 grand.
That's a fair way of
Yeah.
looking at it, correct.
Do you have anything earmarked for the 67,000 now?
Well, we had talked about the speculative building plan. It's actually morphed into a built-to-suit plan.
Yeah.
So we're working in cooperation with GM Low Construction on that. We've identified 4 building sites, and we'll be launching that initiative probably within the next 3-4 weeks. I'm hoping that I will need a large portion of that 107 to get those projects done.
Well, this is probably where I take my opportunity to bring up something that I'd like the board to consider possibly tabling this for a brief, not a brief period, but a short version. I've been talking with people and discussing, considering the possibility of sort of changing the slightly the way in which we have the economic development functioning, KEDC in particular. I believe somebody's had discussions with you sort of about it, but the consideration was basically to take the function, which I think everybody agrees is a necessary function, and consider essentially moving it in-house to the city, possibly EIC contracting to that, details of that kind of worked out in a different way. But before doing that, the reason timing is an issue is because if we decide to fund KEDC right now, we're essentially obligated moving forward to the year's worth of that. So what I'd like, I don't know if I have to make this, I do. I would have to make a motion to table it for now with the direction to try and get a meeting with KEDC, sort of a special meeting with KEDC to discuss or hash out details of that consideration. And at which point we'd come back. What I don't know about is timing of, if nothing was to change, when does KEDC have to know, or when does it have to, I don't know who I'm
When do you
asking.
run out
I'm
of
looking at
money?
Mike like I gotta ask him. But is there a date certain that we have to approve this? Does it have to be done today?
Well, with all due respect, I mean, we do have funding requests into our other stakeholders at this point in time. They're also going through a budget process. So and honestly, since the EIC is our biggest stakeholder, I think others will invariably end up following your lead. So if you, by not taking action right now, they allow the budget process to continue on without making a decision, we may be absent any funding for those other stakeholders, you know, unless we take action now.
So I have a couple of questions. I mean, are we discussing?
Well, there was a motion on the table.
Did you make a motion?
Yeah, he
Well,
made a motion.
I would,
Oh.
I guess if I motion, yeah, if I'm motioning to, I guess I'm motioning to table this, the decision, I guess indefinitely, because I don't know when I would bring it back.
What about next month? We still would have.
That probably is pushing too late.
When is the
That'd be my
when is your
guess.
contract over for
We
fiscal
are
year?
discussing.
September 30th?
Yeah.
I'm just-
So you're
yeah,
funded through
we're
the
gonna-
30th.
No, we ain't
So
voting.
let's, why don't we
Go
ask
ahead.
some questions before you
That-
make your
that-
motion? Would that work?
Yeah, because we can
Okay.
do it
Thank
either
you.
side of that. Yeah, that's fine.
So I guess the real question is if we could have a meeting to talk about the future of how the economic development function is done, and if there is potential for changes to that, what is the drop dead date that you would have to have that decision made? And the question of us is going to be, okay, timing, because again, we go on again for a whole nother year if we don't.
Yeah, that relates to one of my questions,
Do it
which
now.
was, don't we have this 3-year agreement?
That's
We have a 3-year
correct.
agreement, so we have another year in it, and so how does that, I mean, that's a key,
You come up with funding every year.
Right.
You have to approve funding every year.
We have to
Right.
approve it. We aren't obligated to
Yeah.
it.
we're
We
not
approve it.
obligated to a certain amount.
So there's a 3-year agreement. This is the third year. We would be going in this next fiscal year is the third year of that 3-year agreement, subject to annual appropriations by this group
Right.
and the city council.
Right.
So our issue then is appropriated or not appropriated?
That's correct.
And
That's
then what
correct. The
happens?
value is set at 180,000, but it does have to be approved by this group as well as appropriated by the city council.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you. Gary, do you have?
Yes, if there
comment?
were an appropriation made in this meeting, and then some modification was made to how this thing is going, would those funds not be then coming back? I mean, what would happen with them? I mean,
I believe you've made the comment, and I'm just going off of a comment that you made before, and correct me if this is not the way, but I think we had a conversation last meeting about the overage, and if it isn't used, it would be given back to the stakeholders equally pro rata based on what they gave.
That's
Is that in
correct.
writing? I mean, is that part of our funding agreement? Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a fallback.
We still have a motion on the floor?
Nope,
Nope.
no motion's been made. We're
Okay.
having a conversation about,
Okay.
I don't really see that as a fallback so much as a direction, actually.
what do you mean?
Meaning we can move forward with it at whatever amount, whether it's the amount you're requesting, or if we decide to add 40, and then if it isn't used, then it comes back.
Here's the other side of the reason where I'm going with it. This is just my idea, not necessarily something that's written down, okay? But my thought was that one alternative way was to take the position in-house, right? And right now, as it stands right now, with all the discussion that's been going on, not just today, but prior to today, is we have two people in particular that are kind of left in limbo. So it actually puts them less in limbo if we're not telling them we're trying something out for a little while. We're actually giving solid direction where we want it to go. And we kind of have a turning point right now to make things more solid for them. My suggestion is not what's part of the motion, but my suggestion would be that they would be offered as to the in-house position, function. Then it's up to them to take that or no, but then there's stability to what's going on in their immediate future. Having brought this up, and I've heard other conversations, if I was them, I'd be feeling uneasy. I would think that moving forward, if we give it a more solid push, they would be less uneasy, as opposed to saying, let's fund it, and if we'd end up changing in 3 or 4 months, right around Christmas time, hello, we're going to change your world at Christmas. That would probably not occur, and so we'd be almost hamstrung if we put it off. Right. And to get us to a solid decision, it would be a yay or nay. It doesn't necessarily mean we change it, but we'll have if we leave it alone, it'll be a more solid, hey, we're committed to this way from here on out, versus we're committed to something different from here on out, and we can just put it behind us and move forward with economic development.
So that,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Jim.
Is that a motion?
I would make a motion that, I'm going to make a motion, I guess, that we table this particular approval right now with the idea that we're getting with KDC soon to resolve it. So I would make a motion that we table this for indefinitely, I guess is what I have to say. So
Okay. We have a motion on the
that's
floor.
a motion.
Mark?
Yeah, just real quick. You have an option to table it until your next meeting. Beyond that, the city council will be adopting a budget with funding in it or not. So you could say date certain your next meeting, which I think is the 18th.
Okay. I make a motion that we table it until at least the 18th.
Okay.
Sorry, no further than the 18th.
Excuse me, is there a contingency that we meet with the board too, or? Is that part of your motion?
I don't know that I can make that into the motion, can I? Am I allowed to do that?
We can make that motion. And
Well, the only reason I ask is because what we're doing is we'd be freezing something, but we wouldn't be taking the next step to see where we want to go with it. We need.
How about this? How about I make a motion that we table it until the next meeting and direct whoever it is, staff, to set up a meeting with KEDC in the interim to work through it. That's the motion. Does that work?
Yeah.
So we have a
I'll
motion
second.
on the table?
Yeah, I'll second it.
We have a second?
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification, would this be at an EIC regular meeting, or are you talking about a workshop of some kind?
Special.
Okay.
It would have to be, because we'd have to be prepared at the next EIC meeting to
Okay.
do things differently or move in another
3 to
direction.
3.
Or come back to the same one where we are today. Any other questions, comments?
I have some comments. So
Okay.
this is what I wanted to say earlier. I don't like a limbo situation either. So I think that, I understand the discussion around stability. What comes to mind is we have this comprehensive plan that's about to be, or I guess it's begun, or it's starting to take place. We've got committees and so forth that are starting to take a look at various aspects of our community, and I'm certain, surely, this would be part of that discussion, is what are we doing, and what's the best way for us to be doing economic development here in Kerrville, Kirk County. And so I feel like that way of approaching it might be the best way, rather than us just making that decision, is what really is a good way to bring others to the table in that discussion. And so that takes time, you know.
It does take time.
Which I understand is, you know, the Christmas issue.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if that might be a better way to approach it.
Well, timing-wise, that puts us right back to a year from now, roughly. So we'd be back at another budget year making the same sort of thing without all the information yet, because the comprehensive plan would only recently be done.
I'm just talking about the people at the table.
Yeah.
Is what I'm talking about.
That's a very good point that you make, yeah. And truly, if it's going to be a program representative of Kerrville and Kerr County, that's probably the direction in which to go.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion as presented, raise your right hand. And those opposed? 3-3.
Oops.
Not sure what to do in that situation.
It fails. It fails with lack of majority.
Lack of majority.
We need another motion.
We can.
I make a motion that we fund it immediately today according to his budget. So we can move forward without knowing what he's going or what he's doing.
Okay.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I'm afraid of this vote.
Well, I just, no, in other words, if Mr. Will, so we're gonna vote accepting the 140,000 number,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
and it still allows us at any time to come back
Yes,
in
That's
the next
right.
year and
That's
make
exactly
changes.
right,
Is that
Correct.
correct?
That's
Correct.
exactly right.
And the way I understand it too is, right, according to what you were saying, I mean, at some point, if we turn that corner prior to a year from now, the way that your
2
bylaws
years?
are written, that, you know, it could come back to each of the, you know, each of
Yeah,
those.
all
It
the
gets us
funding-
out of limbo. For God's sake,
Exactly.
we don't need
And all the
limbo.
funding is returned on a pro rata basis.
Absolutely.
That was actually my question earlier, is if we did this, then would it
Absolutely.
Right.
prorate back? Yeah.
Right,
Absolutely.
Right.
Vote.
Any further discussion? We do have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand of the motion. And all those that are not in favor, same signal. And that is approved by a vote of 4-2. I would say that this brings up enough to move forward with a strong discussion with the KEDC board about economic development and how that's going to be
Yes.
done in the future. And so I wish I could make a motion to instruct staff to go there.
Well, let me just ask a question, sort of for clarification in determining on whether or not to make a motion.
Okay.
And that would be, if we met with KEDC and the board of KEDC, would that be helpful? Would that be a helpful conversation to have, to give information to a committee that's part of the comprehensive planning process? Or would it not be helpful? Do you see where I'm going with that? So, I mean, everybody's time is valuable. You know, I don't want to waste anybody's time. But if it's something that would be helpful to give information about, you know, sort of what came out of that conversation to a committee, then perhaps we should try to do that.
I would argue there's never a bad time to have communication between EIC and whatever the other players are. And I don't,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah, whether it was productive or not, I think that information would be definitely passed along to the committee, and probably some of the same players would be involved in the comprehensive planning effort anyway. It would just mean that conversation was further along
Okay.
in the process and could help come to some sort of conclusions
Okay.
earlier.
Well, then I move that I move that staff do whatever is needed to try to set up that meeting between us and KEDC. That's my motion.
We have a
I
motion on
second
the
it.
table and a second. All those in favor to set the meeting up, raise your right hand. and that one is unanimous. So staff will get with
We'll
you guys.
we'll get on that right away.
Great.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay. Make sure I'm on the right item. Item 4B is the update and direction to city staff regarding the economic improvement budget for fiscal year 2018. And Mr. Hoppy is going to present that to us. It's the very last page, page 24 of your packet.
Thank you, sir. And I'm not going to go through a great deal of detail beyond what I did last time, but I do want to touch on a couple points because we did have a little bit of reorganization on this page based off of some of the comments and questions that the corporation had last month. Again, in total, this budget allocates just a little under $4.8 million for fiscal year 2018. Revenue projections for fiscal year 2018 are just a little under $3.5 million. That does contemplate a planned drawdown of reserves of approximately $1.3 million, leaving an unrestricted fund balance of just a little over $2.2 million. Again, there are four major categories: administrative, business development, quality of life, and public infrastructure. The administrative allocation is $280,500. That is essentially consistent across fiscal year 2017 and 2018. The business development category continues to contemplate an economic development set aside of $500,000. That economic development set aside fund, if you will, separate from the reserve fund, is at $1.5 million projected at the end of fiscal year 2017. Category 2, quality of life, $2,680,000. That does include debt service payments for River Trail and Sports Complex projects. It also includes the second of a allocation of $750,000 for the total of $1.5 for the tennis center complex. It also includes $200,000 for the downtown parking center. That has its capital project set aside right now that at the end of fiscal year 2017 will total $565,000. So in conjunction with that $200,000 at the end of fiscal year 2018, that total will be $765,100. Public infrastructure, $1,950,000. That does present a second allocation of $1.5 million of the total $3 million that has been agreed upon in regards to reuse distribution. There is a debt service allocation that is contemplated in regards to Legion Lift Station. That's allocated at $200,000 for fiscal year 2018, and then $400,000 in out years. And a $250,000 allocation for workforce housing. Again, the way that that had previously been budgeted was it was kind of a $500,000 every other year, and so what we've done is smooth that out to $250,000 every year, just so there's not sort of that up and down in regards to a budgeting process. But that does contemplate essentially $600,000 at the end of fiscal year 2017. Be happy to answer any questions you may have. As you recall, this is a component unit fund within the city's overall budget process that will be reviewed on first reading tomorrow and then subsequently approved, as we spoke earlier, at the end of September.
I have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
Well, first of all, regarding the public housing.
Workforce housing? Yes, sir.
The workforce housing. Okay, how does that fall after the discussion that we heard just a little while ago? How do we fit into that?
Yes, sir. It can be utilized in a multitude of ways. It could be infrastructure for workforce housing. It could be engineering services for workforce housing. There's a multitude of expenses that are associated typically that are applicable for cities to utilize to enhance the places where your workforce can live. And it's absolutely an issue, I think, as this corporation has recognized in the past. Kerrville is not an inexpensive place to live, particularly for primary job type employment that we're looking at trying to bring in.
When we have the set-asides, like the ED business development set-aside for $500,000.
Yes, sir.
And then this set-aside, for example, for housing. Is that number in our cash balance now that's in our reserve?
It is separate from the reserve balance.
So it's not part of the...
It is allocated to a project fund.
Okay.
Specific for that, in that instance, it's allocated to a workforce housing project fund. In the instance of the economic development set aside, that's a separate project fund for the economic development set aside.
Is there anything that precludes this corporation from moving those funds around for other projects?
No, sir.
Okay, so we have basically we have two funds of cash balance built up. One fund designated for two certain projects that we know of right now, and one is an excess but built up over time.
Yes, sir. In addition to other capital project funds that are more project specific.
Is there anything that precludes this corporation from taking the $500,000 or any of this amount of money and directly spending it on the Legion lift station?
No, sir.
Those are my questions for the moment.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, speaking of the Legion lift station, my question goes back to spending 200 and then 400, 400, and 400. So my assumption is that at some point during 2018, that project will be completed and we'll fund half of a year's worth of debt service. So do we have an idea how much that project is in total?
So right now, the city council has allocated approximately $785,000 towards engineering services. We are in the process of very rapidly trying to move that forward so that come the spring of 2018, we hopefully can go to the city council and have a construction project that is bid and let and start construction in the latter part of 2018. We are continuing to see a lot of activity within the Legion Basin, but for that project moving forward, this community will absolutely lose out on economic development in that area.
But did you have a total for that?
I'm
project?
sorry. Right now, we don't have an engineer's estimate because they're going through that process.
rough.
We think it's roughly $7 million. In the current budget presented to City Council, we are looking at a multitude of different funding allocations. Part of that is cash funding within the Water Sewer Fund. It does contemplate $5 million from the EIC.
Okay.
And this budget contemplates that via debt funding.
Gotcha. And so bottom line is that we're not approving that right now. We're
That's
just setting that, much like our set-asides in this budget. I mean, are you, I know I'm asking a loaded question, but it's on my mind. Are you thinking that because we do approve this, that it's an approved deal, or you really, the city understands that it would have to come through us? I know you understand that legally, but
Yes, sir.
I
Yes,
just
sir.
don't want us to be on this board thinking that we're kind of quasi-approving that.
Yes, sir. We absolutely understand that this board approves their budget, and then ultimately the council approves the budget as well as all funding agreements.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it'd be absolutely no different than the housing set
Correct.
aside and the streetscape one that's being built.
Ms. Patillo, I got
Ah,
your,
you said that right.
your name right. How you doing? Okay. I haven't been able to find this, but I think you mentioned in our prior meeting that we have a 45% limitation.
Well, it's just a practice that we had had in the
Well,
past.
I mean, it's just some kind of
And I think we did it around 40% of total obligated expenditures, including administration. That was my recollection. And Kenneth's nodding too. And if you do add the administrative fees back in on this, plus you have this debt service added to what we already have in debt service, that goes up to almost 46% in 2018 and up to 49% the following year and out. And which I know I voiced it last month. I'm not very excited about that.
Well, I was trying to recall that that's what you said,
Yeah.
and this looked like it was
It wasn't
getting.
policy.
That-
It was more
no,
practice than
whatever.
policy.
Maybe it's a really good practice, but I just was curious.
Yeah, it might be good practice. The only written down thing that I could find, I forget
I
which
couldn't
part
find
it was,
anything.
it was
Yeah.
50%
Yeah.
of
Okay.
debt.
Yeah.
So that's the policy, I guess, was, just in the best practices.
Yeah, I just
What's
couldn't
being
find
done.
anything anywhere, and curious.
I have an issue with just throwing it out before we vote. I was here in November of 2014, I believe, at the EIC meeting, where it was, I think I may have been the only person in the public that was presented for the initial discussion on the sports complex. And apparently at the time, there was a lot of money built up, you know, some excess money in this fund, these funds. And one of the members of the EIC pointed out that we had a lot of money built up, and they didn't believe that cash should be sitting around not earning anything. And so, as I recall, and people can go back and look at the minutes, but I believe they went into executive session. There was very little public discussion on the issue. And then they came out and voted for the sports complex, which is fine. My point is that when we build up these balances, and $500,000, you know, we're at $1.5 million now in one balance, sometimes it leads us, and I'm not, over time, whether it's this board or the next board or the one after, find that they have more money than they know what to do with. And sometimes they make decisions that, you know, may look good or may not. We won't know about this athletic complex for probably 3 or 4 years, whether it's going to be a drag on our economy or very productive for our economy. So I just want to say that I think it would be interesting if there was any discussion on, or just any feedback that anyone else on the board has as to using some of this money now for projects as opposed to continuing to build it up, not knowing when or if we'll ever use the money, because we're still asking the city, I guess, to borrow money for these projects while we're sitting here building up balances, earning, I think, 1% in one account, and, you know, minuscule. I think the average balance is about 45 basis points or 70 basis points on the funds being earned. I just, you know, want to know if anyone else had any comments on that. I'd be just curious. Apparently not.
Well, it's relative to the size of the projects, it's a small balance, which would not allow us to do any larger projects without borrowing funds. And so the answer to your question, though, we do not want those. We want to fund as many of the projects that we can afford to fund that come to the table, and you've got a number of them listed. That's been the MO of the board, is to do as many of them as we can out of cash. But you see what's in front of us. So there are more coming, I'm sure, and we would use that money in those cases. I would hope we would use that money. You're gonna be part of that discussion and vote, but
Yeah.
It's there to use for those projects.
Well, I just feel that the answer that we got in this afternoon's meeting, we got two answers in regard to the use of funds for the lift station. And so I don't, you know, my attitude is that that's a capital asset that the city should maintain for growth, you know, for any project that comes along. And I feel like, you know, we didn't get a whole lot of help from that meeting today, quite frankly. I didn't, because I never got an answer other than no and yes or maybe.
Well, the answer I heard was that it was no, unless it's specifically tied to a project.
Right, but I don't consider personally, I look at Shriner as not one of the major employers of the city, and it's not an economic, I mean, it doesn't fall under economic development in the 3 or 4 main economic development issues that he discussed at the very beginning, such as manufacturing and, you know, that type of job development. So that's, and that's why, you know, my point is, if we're here to try to create jobs, then let's go out and try to create jobs and bring people in, you know, high quality, white collar, you know, people that are knocking down the bucks, and not, you know, just restaurant and hotel people and that kind of thing. And my point is that, well, I've made it 3 times and I'll just finish. I don't believe that this is an issue for the EIC for that lift station, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Any other comments?
No, looking at the budget, you're looking at, including the ED set aside, you're looking at $1.5 million just with the river trail and the sports center. So that's a pretty heavy lift as far as I'm concerned. And we're coming down at the end of 18 with $951,000, and that's not a lot of money. So it's going to continually drop, I think, and as we get more projects, and we're going to have more projects, I don't think we're going to have a very large cash balance.
Okay, we don't have a large cash balance, but if you go with the set-asides at the end of 18, it's like $4.5 million that are sitting in the set-aside. Cash balance in the set-asides, that's a pretty heavy chunk.
Yeah.
That's a full year of EIC funding. And so, I mean, more so than that. And so if we're going to get into discussions about that, kind of the biggest thing that's going to come up, and this Legion lift station is going to be obviously a contentious issue, but when we're staring at roughly $4.5 million sitting there that could be used cash basis to do what the EIC is going to be asked for on that, saving the city $1.5 million or so in debt service, that's a pretty tough thing to turn down. And it feels to me like if it's some way to see it as a economic development, a la the distribution lines that are arguably not economic development, then we should be considering it. Now, that's not what we're considering today, but I just throwing it in there.
And I believe, based on the way the set-aside works, they are not specifically set aside for any particular deal, and that is an option that would be on the table at that time.
Yeah. Other than the ones that are specifically committed via funding agreement.
That's correct.
Such as the tennis center.
Good discussion.
Good.
Anything further?
Not for me. Maybe Sharon.
All right, I will be, I believe, looking for a motion to approve the EIC budget for fiscal year 2018.
I'd so move that we accept the budget as printed.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
We have a second. Gary seconds that. All those in favor of
Can
that?
we discuss? No,
Oh,
no.
discussion,
Yeah.
yes.
So just for clarification, and I think you clarified earlier,
Okay.
but I want to make sure, just like we have with any of these, whether it be housing, streetscapes, whatever, that Legion lift station line that's in there is not a given, and
That's
just
correct.
for the record.
Ultimately, again, it will require a funding agreement between the EIC and the city council.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other discussion?
Nope.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed, raise your right hand. And that motion carries 5-1. All right. I see nothing listed for executive session, which is item number 5. I don't think we have anything outside of that. Any items for future agendas? All right. I will, I suppose, adjourn this meeting. It's 4:53. Thank you very much for attending.